Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers. I'm your host, and here are your top stories for tonight. The UN sounds alarm as Gaza faces catastrophic surge in casualties, with 26 killed in the last 24 hours. Next on Press Freedom Day, Palestinian journalists face murder, threats and extortion, with more than 140 Palestinian journalists martyred amid the ongoing Zionist aggression. And Algeria receives a second group of wounded Palestinian children from the Gaza Strip for medical care. Welcome back to the program. At the outset, Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza announced on Friday that the number of victims of the occupation aggression on the Gaza Strip since October 7 has risen to 34,622 martyrs, in addition to 77,867 injured. Health sources in Gaza also said that the occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip during the last 24 hours, resulting in 26 martyrs and 51 wounded who arrived at hospitals. The United Nations warned on Friday that any Israeli occupation incursion into Rafah could endanger the lives of hundreds of thousands of citizens in Gaza and would deal a major blow to humanitarian operations in the Gaza Strip. The spokesperson for the United Nations Humanitarian Office, Jens Lerke, said in a press briefing in Geneva that there could be a massacre and a serious blow to the humanitarian relief operation in the entire Strip, as they are mainly managed from Rafah.
The hundreds of thousands of people who are there would be at imminent risk of death if there is an assault. So we are looking at, if this happens, both what the emergency relief coordinator has warned about could be a slaughter of civilians, but also at the same time an incredible blow to the humanitarian operation in the entire Strip, because it is run primarily out of Rafah.
The Director General of Gaza's government media office, Ismail al-Thawabata, disclosed that the Israeli occupation stole over 1,000 martyr bodies, secreting them away. Upon their return, many were in an advanced state of decay, their organs seemingly extracted. Al-Thawabata noted that the occupation has thus far surrendered 220 bodies, predominantly lacking heads or limbs.
الاحتلال الإسرائيلي قام بسرقة أكثر من 1000 جثمان من جثامين الشهداء.
The Israeli occupation has taken more than 1,000 bodies of our martyrs, briefly hiding them in an undisclosed location. The Israeli occupation is involved in organ theft from these martyrs. There exists a repository of human skin collected by the occupation, with approximately 170 meters of skin stored. Organs are harvested before returning the bodies for burial. There have been cases of corpses returned without heads, limbs, eyes, or skin.
Palestinian journalist and Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief Wael al-Dahdouh told Al-24 News that the occupation army aims to isolate and expel Palestinian journalists from Gaza to prevent them from reporting the truth. Let's take a listen.
جيش الاحتلال الإسرائيلي
The Israeli occupation actions in Gaza aim to isolate Palestinian journalists, preventing them from witnessing events or conveying facts to the outside world. They sought to keep journalists away from scenes of attacks and massacres. The Zionist entity fears Palestinian journalists serving as role models for journalists worldwide and for future generations.
And during the ongoing Zionist aggression on the Gaza Strip, Palestinian journalists face murder, threats and extortion, with over 140 journalists killed and many others living under constant threat. Hosam Barkan has more details.
In Gaza and across Palestine, journalists bear witness to the horrors inflicted by a Zionist entity. They risk their lives to document the atrocities, only to find themselves targeted by the same force they seek to expose. The occupying entity, in its relentless pursuit of erasing the truth, consider those wielding cameras and microphones as legitimate targets.
Targeting journalists is a long-standing tactic of the Israeli occupation, revealing a systematic pattern of suppression. The loss of our colleagues from yesterday to today underscores the deeply distressing reality of this situation.
For many journalists, their screens serve as both a platform for reporting and a harbinger of their own demise. They narrate the atrocities inflicted by the Zionist forces, only to see news of their own martyrdom broadcasted shortly afterward. Yet, despite the ever-present threat of death, they persist in their mission to relay the truth to the world. Meanwhile, those fortunate enough to remain alive are haunted by the sacrifices made by their fallen comrades. As the world commemorates Press Freedom Day, the Israeli occupation continues its campaign of violence, with more than 140 journalists martyred since October 7th. Additionally, 53 others remain detained, further highlighting the Zionist regime's efforts to suppress the truth.
We persist in conveying the truth from Gaza. Regardless of the challenges, the messages and news we send offer only a fraction of what truly unfolds here. The magnitude of what we witness defies description. What we capture and film is merely 5%, leaving the remaining 90–50% unseen and unphotographed.
In Gaza, field journalists navigate a perilous existence, aware that death may come for them at any moment. Yet, driven by a steadfast commitment to their profession, they stand ready to report the news and ensure that the world bears witness to the ongoing atrocities.
As students' protests are boiling in the U.S. from coast to coast, Joe Biden finds himself tested again in a year already inflamed with many challenges for the U.S. president. Analysts say U.S. student protests now reflect a generational change ahead upcoming elections. Nabil Khazini.
This might not be the best time for such scenes for US President Joe Biden in a year already inflamed with so many critiques over his policies. The student slogans already hold criticism over one of them. Biden's policy towards the war in Gaza is at the heart of the students' protests. This is only another burden for the US president, as this movement could affect the youth vote for Biden and enhance his re-election chances. The nationwide protests, which were initiated at Columbia University and quickly spread to other universities from coast to coast, might reflect what could be a historic moment as young Americans seem to embrace the Palestinian cause as never before.
I think that he's caught in between two generational differences of worldviews. And so there are core Democratic voters who think about what's happening now at Gaza and Israel as a sort of humanitarian aid and crises. And then there's another that thinks about this in terms of geopolitics and trying to protect our allies. And it's really difficult here to play both sides, right?
For Joe Biden, these are moments to walk on a careful line and try to limit political damage. But his rival, Donald Trump, says the damage is already done. The Republican candidate heaped blame on Biden for the students' movement.
Now, it's a whole big hoax going on, but it's a shame. And Biden should speak out. He should speak out. He should say something.
Nearly 7 months after the start of the war against Gaza, analysts say college demonstrations in the US are exposing how badly is free speech balanced and how US students' protests now reflect a generational change ahead of the upcoming elections.
Turkish Trade Minister said on Friday that Turkey will not resume trade with Israel until a permanent ceasefire is secured in Gaza with unhindered humanitarian aid flowing to Palestinians there. Ömer Bolat said in a speech in Istanbul that Israel's uncompromising attitude and the worsening situation in Gaza prompted Turkey to halt trade. It's worth noting that Turkey's decision, announced late on Thursday, made it the first of Israel's key trade partners to halt exports and imports over its military campaign in Gaza.
Starting from yesterday, the trade halt against Israel, including imports and exports, will continue until a permanent ceasefire in Gaza is secured, as well as unhindered humanitarian aid flow to the region.
And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said on Friday that Ankara imposed a trade ban on Israel because it could no longer stand by and watch the violence in Gaza. Let's take a listen.
The whole of the West works for Israel. They all work for Israel, in particular the United States, even by mobilizing all these resources. Unfortunately, the poor, impoverished, destitute people of Palestine were condemned to death in face of these Israeli bombs. We could no longer stand it, and we took our steps. We had a trade volume that had reached $9.5 billion between us, but we closed that as to this trade volume did not exist.
On Thursday evening, wounded Palestinian children from the Gaza Strip arrived in Algeria along with their companions coming from Cairo airport in Egypt, where they were evacuated on board 2 military planes belonging to the Algerian Air Force to take care of them at the level of military hospitals in implementation of the instructions of the Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. The evacuation of the second batch of wounded Palestinians comes after the success of the first operation, while this will be followed by operations for other categories of wounded. And for his part, the ambassador of the State of Palestine to Algiers, Faiz Abu Aita, appreciated Algeria's position in support of the Palestinians by receiving a number of those injured as a result of the ongoing Zionist aggression on the Gaza Strip for the second time. Here's Faiz Abu Aita.
We thank Algeria, its presidency, government and people. We thank the President Abdelmajid Tebboune. We thank the National People's Army, which is receiving the injured with open arms, providing a big number of injured Palestinians with all its services, and there will be other groups, God willing. Algeria is putting all its means to treat them and host them and to provide all what's necessary to take them out of the fierce war atmosphere that they were living in. And in this context, we thank the Algerian state with all its institutions in the name of Palestinian wounded and in the name of Palestinian people and Palestinian leadership.
Meanwhile, the Algerian Minister of Solidarity affirmed that the occasion was an opportunity once again for the Algerian people to demonstrate their solidarity. And Algerian Minister of War Veterans, or Mujahideen, also affirmed that all aspects, especially health-related ones, will be taken care of for the Palestinian wounded. Let's take a listen.
Algerian people have proved once again their sense of solidarity by receiving the second batch of our Palestinian brothers who were evacuated from the war-torn Gaza. There are injured people in a very bad condition. We pray for their recovery. We have applied the instructions of the President of the Republic word for word, and we are still waiting for other batches to arrive as instructed.
Today we have received a number of our brothers from Palestine who were taken care of here in Algeria. They were fully taken care of in terms of hospitalization and treatment. after the state has established all the necessary conditions to achieve this goal. So we wish the injured and wounded to have all the necessary care provided by the Algerian state in the framework of its belief in fair principles toward just causes.
President of the Algerian Red Crescent, Ibtissam Hamlawi, pointed out the arrival of Algerian aid to the Gaza Strip via the air bridge linking Algeria to Al Arish Airport in Egypt. Let's take a listen.
So we take the opportunity today too, as there are other quantities of humanitarian aid that reached our brothers in Gaza and which were distributed to families.
And in different matters, military spokesman Yahya Sari' said in a televised address on Friday that Yemen's Houthis will target ships bound for Israeli ports in any accessible area. The Houthis have been attacking ships in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden since November in a campaign of solidarity with Palestinians and against Israel's war on Gaza.
We announced the beginning of the implementation of the fourth phase of escalation as follows. First, the targeting of all ships that violate the ban on Israeli navigation ships that are heading to the port of occupied Palestine in the Mediterranean Sea, in any area that reaches our hands. Second, the implementation of this will start from the time of the announcement of this statement.
In Syria, the Ministry of Defense reported that 8 soldiers sustained injuries following an Israeli aggression near Damascus. The attack occurred around 10:50 p.m. on Thursday, originating from the direction of the occupied Syrian Golan Heights. The airstrike targeted a site near Damascus, resulting in casualties and material losses. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has congratulated the Aqbou female football team for winning the Algerian Cup. In a message on his X platform, President Tebboune wrote in a quote, or I quote, "Congratulations to the ladies of Aqbou who won the Algerian Football Cup. My congratulations go to the technical team and all those who contributed to this outstanding victory." Representing Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algerian Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi arrived in the Gambian capital Banjul on Friday to participate in the work of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Summit, which will be held starting from Saturday and will last for 2 days. The summit will discuss issues of the Islamic world, most notably the Palestinian issue, in addition to economic, humanitarian, and social issues, and issues related to rejecting hate speech and Islamophobia and promoting dialogue among civilizations. Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Ahmed Attaf is continuing his participation in the Danish capital Copenhagen in the 21st session of the Africa-Nordic Ministerial Meeting. The program of this session was marked by the activation of the new feature related to the involvement of economic actors from the African and Nordic sides. And on the sidelines of his participation in the Copenhagen meeting, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held bilateral talks with his counterparts from Tanzania, Angola, and Rwanda, along with the Somali Minister of State. The talks centered on relations of cooperation and brotherliness that bind Algeria with these countries and ways to strengthen them, in addition to exchanging views on the most prominent topics on the agenda of the ministerial meeting. Meanwhile, the meetings constituted an opportunity to review developments in the situation at the continental level and the role played by Algeria within the group of 3 African states within the United Nations Security Council, in addition to coordinating positions and unifying visions on important events within the African Union. And Sahrawi Foreign Minister Mohammed Sidati has stressed that the Sahrawi people will continue their unwavering struggle against the Moroccan occupation. Sidati said in a statement on the sidelines of the activities of the International Media Conference in solidarity with the Sahrawi people that the Polisario Front will not stop the war it has been waging for 50 years unless the United Nations adopts practical measures to decolonize Western Sahara.
Armed struggle is continuing. We are deepening our tactic, our strategy of constant and purposeful draining that inflicts the maximum of damage to the regime despite its attempts to dissimulate and hide the effects of this war. This war will still go on and will not stop until we notice that the UN not only has the will, but it practically seeks to decolonize Western Sahara. And this is subjected to circumstances and conditions. Otherwise, the Sahrawi people will continue its struggle and will not retreat nor hesitate under any circumstance.
Mauritania's government spokesperson Nani Would Ashruka has expressed concern over the unstable situation along the border with Mali. He noted ongoing activities between armed groups and Malian authorities in the border regions, highlighting the complexities due to geographical and demographic factors. Ashruka emphasized that Mauritania's forces and army are prepared to safeguard the nation's sovereignty. Additionally, the Mauritanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the Malian ambassador in Nouakchott to protest against repeated attacks on Mauritanian nationals within Malian territory.
The border region remained unstable, with frequent movement among different groups along the borders, presenting challenges for control. We emphasize that our army and armed forces are fully ready to protect territorial integrity. Regardless of threats, our armed forces will meet it head-on and respond firmly.
And to the Saudi capital, where the Theatre and Performing Arts Authority launched the opera Zarqa al-Yamama, which embodies a dramatic artistic painting that interrogates history and recalls events in the pre-Islamic era through the story of Zarqa al-Yamama, the wise woman whose insight and extraordinary abilities are narrated in history books. The first opera of its kind and the largest in the Arabic language to be held in Saudi Arabia, was written and performed by Saudi artists and others of different nationalities.
Arab culture is rich with inspiring stories on a human level. We found that this story includes several inspiring elements. Another noteworthy aspect is that the protagonist is a woman, signaling to the world the high status of women among Arabs.
She is a wise woman with unusual eyes, but the colors with blue kohl. Over time, in their imagination, Arabs thought that those blue eyes, coupled with that wisdom, she could see very far. She could perceive flocks of pigeons as far as the eyes could see and discern the exact number with just a glance.
We depict the scenes of this beautiful story of زرقاء اليمامة through this theatrical production, through the beautifully script.
من خلال النص الجميل اللي انكتب. الموسيقى طبعاً بتروي قصة أيضاً.
In fact, the music also tells a story, and the magnificent scenography performed in this production was honestly above expectations.
كان صراحة فوق التوقعات.
If you have followed this entire opera, it's a tale and the story unfolding until the very end, with successive events. So, we narrate the ancient story of Yamama across time.
The famous story of Zarqa al-Yamama, celebrated in Arab heritage, is today revitalized on stage in a unique manner with dramatic roles and operatic interpretations.
And that's a wrap for tonight's program. Thank you for tuning in and have a good night.